Hey guys, I'm back continuing my series of the Road to Doomsday reviews, along with me Daredevil Born Again Season 2. I've already covered the 2003 Daredevil, so let's take the next step on Elektra from 2005. Directed by Rob Bowman, starring Jennifer Garner, Terrence Stamp, amongst other people. It's a spin-off to Daredevil from 2003, with Jennifer Garner returning once again in the titular role. She's assigned to assassinate this guy and his daughter, who are being targeted by the Hand. And as she forms a bond with the father and daughter, she finds herself in the middle of this conflict, and she inevitably fights against the Hand. Now, I am going to go into spoilers, but even then, I don't really think there's much to spoil. To go right into it, this movie is rather uneventful. Nothing really big happens in here. Similar to the 2015 Fantastic Four, although I would say this is miles better in comparison to that. There's at least some sort of entertainment factor you have with Jennifer Garner being this really skilled martial arts fighter, and some action sequences that I guess are decently entertaining, although they are rather quite hokey. I mean, this is a comic book movie at its core. I understand that there's going to be some stuff like that in here. But as I said with the plot, some time has passed between this movie and the 2003 Daredevil. If you saw the end of that movie, we got a hint that Elektra was somehow still alive. And they explain in the movie through a flashback, I suppose, how Stick was able to resurrect her by some sort of healing powers that he has, and that she's able to use on the young girl who has powers of her own too. Kind of getting ahead of myself here, but the big thing I will say about this is it has a somewhat interesting first half, but then it goes into this really weird direction where nothing really major happens. I mean, something really big happens. Yes, there's a big battle, she trains the young girl, or she goes back to Stick's group, but it all feels like a jumbled mess. There's really not a lot of time given to the characters, especially. We get some of that in the first half with Mark and Abby, the father and daughter. The mom supposedly got killed by a drunk driver. She's homeschooled and she's very rebellious, like any other teenager would be. And once Elektra realizes that these two people are the ones that she's supposed to kill, she decides to back out on the contract. I kind of like seeing the conflict behind the eyes, I mean, the stuff that we get from her anyway, but there really isn't much to the character of Elektra to begin with. Now, I don't know the source material. I can't comment on how accurate this is, but I could sort of tell if I'm gonna go out on a limb on this one. It's probably nothing like the Elektra comics by Frank Miller or whoever created this character. I just looked it up. It is Frank Miller. Should have figured that this is not the kind of character Stan Lee would have created. I didn't get to see this movie in theaters, but I think I saw it on demand, or maybe we rented it from someplace like Blockbuster, or maybe it was on TV. I don't remember exactly. But I remember even at that age, I wasn't really impressed. Even watching it a few nights ago, I still felt more or less the same. Now, some people have gone as far as to say that this is one of the worst in the genre, somewhere along the lines of Halle Berry's Catwoman. I don't know what exactly people are smoking when they say that. I apologize if that sounds too mean, but really, it's not that bad. I mean, Halle Berry's Catwoman, we don't need to go into that right now. That's for another day, somewhere further down the line. I don't have the energy for that, neither here nor there. But it really is just boring and uninteresting. And the big problem is with the characterization of Elektra. We're not really given much of a glimpse inside of her head and what her deal is. Throughout the movie, Elektra's just very stoic and doesn't really let anybody in. And we get some flashbacks to her childhood with her father and her mother, but even then it's still confusing. And it's revealed that this one guy from the Hand had killed her mother when she was a child, which the impression I got from the 2003 Daredevil that Kingpin had something to do with it. Well, misinterpretation on my part. And with Jennifer Garner, she's a solid actress. I got nothing against her personally. I have liked her in some other movies I've seen her do, from Juno and 13 Going on 30. Yes, I actually do like that movie. Shut up, we all have our guilty pleasures. And she's obviously really good at doing fight scenes. I mean, from what I've seen in the Alias TV show, I've never watched it, she knows how to carry herself in this kind of scene when it requires her to do so. But with her commitment to the show Alias, I'm sure some of you already know this, so it's probably not new ground. They didn't really have a whole lot of time to use her, and I think it's pretty clear once you watch the movie with that knowledge in mind. And we also get some brief glimpses of what she's able to do. She has the ability to look through time, communicate with somebody telepathically from a distance, and she also has the ability to resurrect people like the young girl Abby, something that Terrence Stamp or Stick taught her. And even with that, he trains her to be this great warrior, but then he shoves her away for some reason, and we're not really told why. Even she doesn't really seem to know why. Only then at a certain point in the third act, he says, "Actually, I was testing you, didn't you know?" What was the test? And the Hand are just really a bunch of bad guys that need to be in there. You got the one who's called Tattoo, whose tattoos are able to turn into actual animals like snakes or wolves. And you have this really big guy who is able to withstand the impact of Elektra's swords, but then is easily crushed by a tree, vaporizing into green dust, just like the poodles in Ang Lee's Hulk. And of course, you get the woman who gives around the kiss of death. She's really just there to suck the life out of people. These characters have zero, and I mean absolute zero development, or some sort of presence where they emulate some kind of threat. whereas you would see that in movies like Infinity War with Thanos' personal guard. It is important to keep in mind that this movie came out in 2005 when the genre was still kind of feeling its way along, even though it had some really big home runs with X-Men, Spider-Man, and I guess maybe to a point the first two Blade films. X-Men and Spider-Man were really the ones who shot it into the sky. But later in 2005 you had Batman Begins. So the genre was on its way, but it still had a good distance to go. I would imagine if you were to see this over 20 years ago, people were probably a lot harsher on this, and some people still are. Watching it today, like I said earlier, it's really not that bad.
It's not awful, but it's not good.
And this is made by a guy named Rob Bowman, who had a hand in the X-Files and Star Trek The Next Generation, among other projects. Certain shots he's able to competently direct, like with the action scenes in the opening sequence where we get a big exposition dump from Jason Isaacs' character. I do kind of like that, but I wish that they didn't include the name Elektra. If you were going into this movie, you know that somehow she's still alive, and they don't really explain how exactly, but neither here nor there. But I do kind of like the looming threat that's lurking around when we see Elektra getting closer and closer to that room. But then the last half just delves into this really weird tone shift where we see a big confrontation between her and the guy who killed her mother. Big reason for that is because everything in the second act was just skimmed over, barely given any attention at all. They even had a scene where Ben Affleck returns as Matt Murdock in a dream sequence she has, but ultimately they cut it. Which, on that note, I only watched the theatrical cut the other night. I know there's a director's cut, and I've heard it slightly improves this one, although not by much, especially in comparison to the 2003 Daredevil, where he had a little more of a tonal shift to go off of, and kind of makes the movie slightly better, I guess, depending on who you talk to. I haven't heard a similar thing in this situation, and I kind of don't care to know if it is true or not. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say about Elektra, except that it's just boring, bland, and not interesting in the least bit. Not terrible, but not exactly good either. And Jennifer Garner, who's proven herself in other projects, has absolutely nothing or little to nothing to work with here. Although she ended up in Deadpool and Wolverine as the same character, so the world does balance out for her in this category. So that's all I have for you on Elektra. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this movie if you've seen it. Hit like and subscribe if you'd like to see more from me. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one. Later!